Dear students, today we are going to discuss about the subject of elements of civil engineering. In this subject, you are being taught several topics like the introduction, then surveying, then building material, then building planning, building construction, transportation engineering, water resources engineering. This type of the different topics we are discussing in this subject. Elements of civil engineering is the subject which is dealing with the basics aspects of the civil engineering. As you are aware that civil engineers are concerned with the different types of the structures, and out of which buildings are of the prime importance. And so therefore, a building is a very important structure for the civil engineers. So today we will discuss something about the building construction. So today's topic we are going to discuss is the building construction. So how the building is constructed, which are the components of the building, which are the common dimensions or the nominal dimensions of the different components in a building to be provided, which are the different parts of a building, which are the different types of the building, that will be covered into this particular topic. This is a picture of the modern RCC framed building. Nowadays, most of the construction is carried out with the material known as a reinforced cement concrete. The common method of construction of the building is to first of all construct a reinforced cement concrete framework in which the different parts are the slabs, beams, columns. Below the ground there will be the foundation, and after the framework is made, the different partition walls are constructed to create the space for the rooms, and then the different finishing items are constructed then gradually. So this is a picture of a modern RCC framed building. Many different types of the buildings are there. This is a picture of a one residential bungalow. Here you see that this ground plus one story residential bungalow is constructed. This is a building for the purpose of the dwelling of the for the purpose of habitation. So these are called the residential buildings. This is another picture of a building. This is a common residential apartment. Different stories are constructed. Here this is a multi-story residential apartment, and the different flats are constructed. So these are the different types of the building pictures we are observing. Here is a modern public building. So the public building is a non-residential type of the building where some offices or some other type of the work is carried out. This is a picture of one public building. This is also constructed of a common material known as the RCC. Buildings are many different types. This is one typical building in the rural area which is constructed with the Mangalore tile roofing tiles. In the rural area, the buildings are constructed with the locally available material like the bricks, lime, and the tile materials. This is one picture of that. This is one typical picture of the buildings you may find in a typical rural area of the Gujarat. In the villages of the Gujarat state, you might find this type of the buildings constructed in the villages in the rural areas. So we have just seen the different types of the buildings, different pictures of the building we have seen. By that you might have idea regarding which type of the different types of the buildings are there and what are the some basic materials that may be used. In the detailed discussion, we will discuss the following topics. One is the classification of the buildings. Today we will see that how the buildings are classified. What are the types of the building that we will discuss today. Then is the types of the loads acting on the building. As you are aware that the buildings are subjected to the different types of the loads which are acting on the building. These different types of the load we will discuss in detail. Then we will see the building components. Which are the different components of the building? What are the different functions these components are performing? Say for example, one of the component of a building is a foundation. The function of the foundation is to transmit the load which is there in the building to the lower strata of the soil. So transmitting the load of the superstructure to the soil, that is the function of a foundation. So there are different components are there. What are their functions that we will discuss in that particular topic. Now the buildings are to be constructed. Therefore, it is necessary to know the dimensions or the size of that every component. So we will learn what are the normal dimensions of a different components to be provided in a building. So these are the topics we will be discussing in this particular today's lecture regarding the building construction. Mainly the classification of the building, types of the loads, components and their different dimensions. First of all, let us see what is a building itself is. What a building means. A building basically is constructed to create a living space. The buildings is a very basic necessity of our human race. So society needs the construction of a building to provide the shelter to its people. So first of all, let us see what a building means. According to the National Building Code, it defines a building as any structure for whatsoever purpose and whatsoever materials constructed, and every part thereof, whatever used for human habitation or not, and it includes all the structural elements like foundations, plinth, walls, floors, roofs, etc., with all building services like water closet, then the bath, the stairs, etc. So the basic definition means that it may be constructed for whatever may be the purpose, whatever the different materials may be used. It creates a space for the human habitation, and it is including all the components right from the foundation at the bottom to the roofs at the top. it also includes the services which are also provided in the building. Say for example, electricity, water supply, sanitation, air conditioning, networking, this fire protection, this all comes under the categories of the services to be provided in the building. Nowadays there is a concept of the intelligent building, which also includes the networking, a CCTV camera network, and all other modern information technology is being applied for the operation and the function of the building. You may have a automatic monitoring of the different operation of the gates. This type of the modern services may be provided. One of the important services to be provided in a building is the electrification, then after the water supply, then that is a plumbing, then is a sanitation, then is nowadays it is required to be connected with the your networking of the different cables. All the parts or the rooms will be likely to be connected with the internet. So networking is also a nowadays part of any building services. Fire protection is also one of the services to be provided. A lift is also a service. So these are the different types of the services are to be provided. So buildings is basically defined as it is for whatever types for the whatever the purpose or whatever the material you may use. It includes all the components and the services, and that is basically constructed for the purpose of the habitation or for the space of the living to be created. So buildings, first of all, it is a basic necessity. So this comes into the category of a very basic necessity for a person, for a family. It is a dream of a common citizen to have a building of his own possession. So this is a basic necessity. The second thing important, it creates a space for the living. It provides a living space where you can work, where you can sleep, where you can eat, where you can do so many other activities. So buildings are basically a creation of the living space for the human race. The buildings are developed throughout the centuries. In the beginning of the civilization, the human race or the persons were living into the cave or the hollows of the trees. So right from the cave, they have started the construction. Then it gradually developed. Earlier buildings were constructed from the mud bricks, means your common kacha bricks were used for the construction of the small buildings. Then after the development of the construction started with the stonework, all your architectural site that you see, the buildings which were constructed, that was prior to the 1800 or so, they were all constructed with the stone masonry. All historical buildings were constructed with the stone. Stone was the common material for the construction of the building. Then after, gradually, the development of the construction technology was made and buildings were constructed with the reinforcement concrete and the steel. In the mountainous regions or in the areas like forest where the wood is available easily, the buildings are constructed with the timber. So depending on the type of the material which is available in the vicinity, the construction method is adopted accordingly and the type of the building constructed accordingly depending on the type of the material. Then another very important aspect that you may select the type of the building, which is based on the substrata, means the soil available. If the hard soil or the hard rock is available, you can construct a load-bearing structure or a heavy building on that. If that much bearing capacity soil is not available, you have to construct the building accordingly. So foundation is a very important point to be kept in mind at the time of selecting the type of the building. First of all, we will see the classification of the building. The buildings are classified accordingly to its purpose, for what purpose the buildings are constructed. So classification, which is based on the occupancy, and the second mode of the study or the classification of the building is the classification which is based on the type of the structure, that we will discuss later on. First of all, we will start discussing the classification which is based on the occupancy. Means how it is occupied, what is the purpose of construction of the building. On that basis, the classification is made. The National Building Code is classifying the different buildings according to the type of its use, or you may call it as a occupancy. First of all, one group A is the residential building. Then comes the group B, that is the educational building. Then is the group C, that is the institutional buildings. Then is the group D, that is the assembly buildings. Then is the group E, that is the business buildings. Then is the group F, that is the mercantile buildings. Then is the group G, this comes the industrial buildings. Then is the group H, that is the storage buildings. Then is the group J, is the hazardous buildings. So depending on its different objectives or the purpose of the construction of the building, they are classified right from the group A to right from the group J according to its use. That classification and their different classification, that we will discuss one by one. First is the group A, that is the residential building. A residential building means that it is constructed for the purpose of the residence. It normally means that the people are living there. This particular residential building, the peculiarity of this building is that a sleeping accommodation is provided for the dwelling permanently or the temporarily. A sleeping accommodation is included in your residential building. You are provided with the bedrooms. These bedrooms are provided for the space for the sleeping. So one of the important aspects for a residential building is that you are providing a sleeping accommodation. That sleeping accommodation maybe you are providing, either it may be a permanent or it may be a temporary one, but it is there. It may be with or without the cooking also. Kitchen is normally provided. So with or without the cooking, normally the provision of the kitchen is made in the residential building. But in some of the residential building, you may not have the kitchen. This type of the residential buildings, commons are different bungalows, the flats, row house, villas, then the cottages, then dormitories, etc. This is a picture of a residential building. This is a picture of a row houses constructed for the buildings. These buildings are constructed for the purpose of the living accommodation. They are constructed in a row. So this type of the buildings are constructed, and as they are constructed near to each other, the space will be saved. This is one picture of a low-cost housing. In the rural area, to provide a residence to the citizens, all the peoples, it is necessary to construct a low-cost housing so that a common man can also afford the construction of this type of the building. So many different many different construction methods are utilized, and the commonly available material, they are also constructed so that the cheap or the low cost housing is constructed. This will be helpful to provide the accommodation for the common people in the rural area. With a small amount, this can be constructed. For the low cost housing, the locally available material and locally available technology is used, and that's why the cost of the construction is reduced. This is one picture of the colony where the low cost housing is constructed. So for the common people with the minimum amount, a basic facility is provided in the form of the low cost housing in this type of the colony. Proper water supply and proper sanitation is also required to be provided in this type of the low cost housing colony. This is another picture of the rural low cost house. In this low cost house, the locally available mangrove groups are utilized, and the common material which is available in the rural area, brick, is utilized. And with the cheap material, this type of the rural low cost house is constructed. So this was about the discussion of the Group A, that is residential buildings. The second category or the second classification of the building is a Group B. Group B includes the educational buildings. Educational building means these are the buildings used for the purpose of providing the teaching or the training. These buildings includes, one is the school, then is the colleges, then is the nursery, libraries, and the universities. These buildings are imparting a training to the students or the pupils. In this type of the educational buildings, you have to construct a building with the different classes, laboratories, libraries, and other facilities which a student needs in a educational building. Educational buildings are different types of the building provided in the universities and all the educational institutes. The purpose of creation of this building is to provide a learning space to the student. Normally, it includes the classrooms. This is one picture of a educational campus. In educational campus, enough space is to be provided for the building as well as all other facilities, as well as some facilities for the sports, a playground, and necessary other facilities is also to be provided in the educational buildings. Group C is the institutional buildings. These institutional buildings of the Group C, that includes the buildings for the hospitals relating to the health. You may have a hospital, you may have a primary health center, you may have a community health center, a dispensary. This type of the buildings are included in these institutional buildings. It also includes the buildings for the aged people, jails, reformatories, etc. This type of the buildings are to be provided in the for the purpose of the medical health and health care. There the necessary provisions for the different units are to be provided. It may include the doctor's consulting room, waiting room, dispensaries, laboratories, the wards for the patients, indoor patients, and necessary operation theater. One is a pharmacy store. This type of the units may be provided in the institutional buildings. This is one picture of a hospital building. So hospital building includes many different facilities like the consulting room, waiting room, etc., which I have just mentioned. This type of the facilities should be planned in a hospital building. Next is the Group D, that is the assembly buildings. As the name suggests, these are the buildings to be constructed for the purpose of the gathering of the people. So that's why this type of the buildings are known as assembly buildings. In the assembly buildings, it is the group of the people assemble or gather for amusement, assembly hall, exhibition hall, social purpose, religious purpose, whatever may be the purpose. They are assembled together. They are maybe gathering for the purpose of amusement. They may be gathered for one conference. They might have gathered for some other purpose like a marriage. They might have assembled for other social purpose. They might have a public meeting also. So the purpose may be either amusement, the purpose may be either social, the purpose may be either religious, or whatever. They might have assembled for the purpose of the prayer. The common assembly buildings are cinema halls, the temples, the mosque, church, and different other assembly buildings are there. This is a picture of a Mahatma Mandir at Gandhinagar. This is an example of the assembly building. This is another picture of the Swaminarayan temple. This is also an example of a assembly building. It is a picture of the Akshardham. These buildings are constructed for the purpose of the prayer. These are the examples of a assembly building. Now, after discussing the assembly building, we will discuss Group E, that is the business buildings. Business buildings means these are the buildings used for the transactions or the business of the like the banks, different offices where some office work is carried out by the different officers. This type of the buildings are come under the category of a business building. It also includes the lunch counters. So different banks, different offices comes under this category of the Group E, that is the business building. Many different public offices, so it may be an insurance office, or it may be a bank office, it may be a government office, or it may be a office of a private company. This type of all the offices comes under the category of a business building. This is a one picture of a government office. So this building is constructed for the collector office at the Junagadh. That is an example of an office building where the office work is carried out. And now, after the discussion of the business buildings, we will discuss about the next category of the building, that is Group F building, that is the mercantile building. As the name suggests, it is a market buildings. So where a market is being carried out and where the shopping is made, where the purchase is made, this type of the normal buildings where the mercantile activities are carried out, they are known as mercantile buildings. These are, one is the buildings such as shops, then is the stores, then is the markets, different types of their shopping malls, then the showrooms, then the shops. These all are comes under the category of the mercantile building. This mercantile building display, sale or merchandise, wholesale or the retail. Where this type of the market transaction is made, normally it is a shops or a showroom. These buildings come under the category of the Group F, that is a mercantile building. Now next category of the building is the Group G, that is the industrial buildings. Industrial buildings are the buildings which are constructed for the purpose of the manufacturing or the production of a goods. They are normally located in the industrial development areas where a land is made available for the purpose of carrying out the industrial work or the production. These types of the building include any building where production is made. The common example of the industrial buildings are factories, then the workshops, then the laboratories, then the different mills, then the dairies. This type of the buildings which are used for the production or the manufacturing of the goods. These buildings are provided with the different facilities of the electrification, water supply and other transportation facilities which industrial buildings need. These buildings are to be provided with the proper ventilation so that when the workers are carrying out the production of the goods in that factory, they must have a good and the proper ventilation available. So proper lighting, proper supply of the power that is a basic necessity of any industrial building. Now the next category of the building is the group H, that is the storage building. Storage buildings includes the warehouses. Warehouses are the buildings provided for the storage of the material. This type of the warehouses are constructed for storing of the food grains. One of the another necessity of constructing this type of the building is at the port. At the port, when there is a material is to be handled on a very large scale, at that particular site, a larger and the big warehouses are constructed so that whatever the material which is either to be imported or whatever the material either to be exported, that can be stored in the big warehouses constructed on the port site. These warehouses are constructed with the either a galvanized steel sheets or your asbestos cement sheet. These warehouses are constructed for the purpose of storage of the either it may be a raw material or it may be a finished goods. Then another example is the cold storages. For preserving the agricultural products for a longer time, you require a cold storage. For the onions or the potatoes, this type of the agricultural products, when they are produced in a large scale, this type of the cold storages are constructed. One is the transit sheds. In the transit sheds, in the port area, the goods are stored for a relatively small duration of the time, and that is known as a transit sheds. Then is the godowns. In the godowns, you have to store the different materials. Garages means garages are the buildings constructed where the vehicles either they are being parked or they may be repaired. Then is the hangars. Hangars are the buildings constructed for your parking of the aircraft when they are not in the operation. The next category of the building we are going to discuss is the group J, that is the hazardous building. There are many different buildings which stores a highly inflammable material like the oil depots. Oil depots are storing a large scale material which is highly inflammable. So if the proper care is not taken, there are chances of the fire. This type of the buildings which are susceptible to some hazards, this type of the buildings are known as hazardous building. These buildings are storing the materials like combustible material, like the poison. Some of the chemical industries are storing the different poisonous gases. So that particular buildings or the factories which are storing this type of the hazardous or the poisonous gases, they should be provided with the proper measures of the safety, and proper care is to be taken so that the leakages of this type of the poisonous gases is avoided. So in the hazardous building, the combustible material like the poison, gases, etc. are stored. These oil depots, magazines, some of the chemical factories, they come into the category of the hazardous building. Now, the first category of the classification that we have seen, that category of classification is the classification which is based on the utilization. It may be a residential or a institutional, it may be a business, mercantile, store, industry, or the hazardous building, depending on the type of its utility we have seen. Now, there is another way on the basis of which the building may be classified. The another way of classification of the building is the classification which is based on the structure. According to the different material, according to the different methods of the construction, different types of the buildings are constructed. And when you look the distinction of this type of the methods, when you look into the distinction of the type of material being utilized, you can have that classification, and that is known as the classification which is based on the structure. According to the different structural systems, the buildings are classified as follows. The number one is a load-bearing structure. The first way in which the buildings are classified is a load-bearing structure. The second way of classifying the structure on the basis of the type of structure is a framed structure. And the third way of classifying the structure on the basis of the type of structure is the composite structure. In short, load-bearing structure, frame structure, and the composite structures, these are the three types of the structures on the basis of which the buildings are classified. The first category of the structure is a load-bearing structure. All the earlier buildings which were constructed with the stone masonry, which were constructed with the brick masonry, they were all the load-bearing structure. In the load-bearing structure, loads from the slabs and the beam, etc. are transmitted. You see that building is having the dead load. The load of the part of the building like the slab, beam, and the other walls, etc., they all comes into the category of the dead load. This load of the building is to be transmitted to the lower ground. That means that the load is to be transmitted to the foundation. In case of the load-bearing structure, the loads from the slab, the beam, etc. are transmitted through walls to the subsoil below ground through foundation. Means the transmission of the load from your walls to the foundation. So the transmitting agent is the wall. Wall is a very important component in the case of the load-bearing structure. Now, as you know that the load from the top to the bottom will increase, the wall thickness reduces from ground floor to the first floor. Because as you go on the top, the load will be reducing, and therefore as the load is getting reduced, the thickness of the wall is little bit reduced. This type of the load-bearing structures are suitable where hard strata is available at the shallow depth. When the hard rock or the hard soil is available at the shallow depth, you can have the construction of this type of the load-bearing structure, means that the load is being transmitted to the foundation through the wall. This is a picture of a load-bearing structure. You can see this structure is constructed with the brick masonry. In this building, the entire load of the building is being transmitted to the foundation through the wall. Here, the beams and columns are not constructed, but the wall itself is the component responsible for the taking the load of the building. As if you construct this type of the load-bearing structure, there are two basic requirements are there. One requirement is that it must have a hard strata at the shallow depth. And second is that you can construct this type of the load-bearing structure up to a ground floor plus 3 story. It is not desirable to have a multi-story building with this type of the structure because there is a limitation of the thickness of the wall. This is a picture of a load-bearing structure. Here you see the two walls are constructed. These walls are responsible for the transmission of the load. The load of the RCC slab is being transmitted to the foundation through the wall. The components of the buildings you see in the picture is the RCC slab, the load-bearing brick wall, the flooring you are able to see, and at the bottom is the foundation. Foundation is the structural component of a building responsible for transmitting the load of the structure to the soil. Now, according to the recent developments and the available material which is commonly available nowadays is a reinforced cement concrete. So, as we have seen at the time of discussing the load-bearing structure, we have seen the limitation of this load-bearing structure is that you cannot construct a multi-story building. So, when you want to construct the more number of the stories, you must have a different type of the material and the different type of the construction is required. So, in this, when there is this type of the need, the frame structure is an option. Nowadays, all multi-story structures are constructed with the RCC material. RCC frame structure is a common practice adopted for constructing the modern buildings. In the frame structure, it is a structure comprising of the slabs resting on the beams. These slabs are resting on the beams, columns, and the whole load is transmitted through the frame of the beam and columns. These loads are transmitted through the frame of the beam and columns. So, reinforced cement concrete is the most suitable material. This second category of the type of the structure is a RCC framed structure. Here you can see that the load is not being transmitted by the wall, but the load is transmitted by the columns. The load of the slab is transmitted to beam, then the load of the beam is transmitted to the column, and the load of the column is transmitted to the foundation. and from foundation it is transmitted to the subsoil. This is the basic concept which is adopted in the construction of a frame structure. Here you can see a picture of the RCC frame structure. Here you are seeing the slabs, the beams and the columns. This is a typical lookout of a RCC frame structure. Here you see a picture of the RCC frame structure. Here you can see the RCC slab is there. On the side there is a RCC column is there, and that load of this column is being transmitted to the footing. So here in the today's lecture we have discussed about the basics of the buildings. Then we have seen the different types of the building according to its utilization, and then we have seen the different types of the building according to the methods of the construction. So today's discussion is over. In the second part we will discuss the further aspect relating to the building. Thank you all the students. Thank you very much.